Let's continue now our conversation we began yesterday live on CNBC with Steve Bannon and Kyle Bass to talk more about China, maybe the threat there, also about what the U.S. needs to do to make the playing field level when it comes to IPOs and public listings here. Kyle, I want to start with you on that as much because to list a company in the United States, to go public, as we're finding out with Lyft and all these other companies, is hard. Takes a lot of lawyers, takes stacks of paper. The regulations are huge. You believe it's way too easy for Chinese companies to list here, and we should simply make the SEC enforce what you call a level playing field.
Right, and we can even say foreign companies, right? It's not just China.
Fair enough.
There's a certain level of transparency. There's a certain level of risk. There's a certain level of attestation to the veracity of the numbers in the financial reports. There are various levels of ADR listings in the U.S. that have lesser and lesser requirements for raising, not only listing, just raising money. If they want to do an equity offering or a bond offering here, everyone should adhere. Foreign companies should adhere to the exact same standards as U.S. companies. They should actually have a Big Four auditor. They should sign off on the financial results. And by the way, they should maybe even show us financials. Some of these companies, Chinese banks in particular, they don't even have to show you financials, right? This is crazy. Jay Clayton could snap his fingers and fix this in 1 second.
The head of the SEC.
Yeah, all the SEC's got to do is make listing requirements homogenized for the rest of the world.
But it's not like we don't have fraud here. I mean, there was a company called Onbang a few years ago. They bought the Waldorf Astoria right near where we are in New York. Yep. They made a bid for Starwood and Marriott, whatever it was, $12 billion. No one knew where they got their money. Right. They just sentenced the guy that ran Onbang, who is married to Deng Xiaoping's granddaughter, I believe, to 20 years in prison for fraud. Is that what you're talking about, that the system is too closed? Be clear,
we didn't sentence anyone.
Right. They did.
They did.
They did.
Yeah, we've never sentenced anyone from China.
By the way, this is an interesting point. Anban Insurance Company is a money laundering and influence peddling operation of this Chinese Communist Party, CCP. It wasn't fraud. He got caught up in the anti-corruption thing. He basically screwed up. Essentially, over here doing deals, he had too much exposure.
You think they're putting one of their own away?
100%.
They became too famous.
Too famous. They put
just like Jack Ma.
15. Yeah, just Jack Ma. What they have done.
What about Jack Ma?
Well, Jack
Ma,
they fired him as Alibaba. They removed him.
He retired.
Yeah, he retired.
He stepped down.
Brian,
he retired.
Does he still own his stock? It's gone.
Right. Same thing happened in H&A.
He had to sign it over to five guys, unnamed individuals.
The chairman of H&A was the same way. The chairman of H&A died mysteriously taking a selfie off a 5-foot wall in France, in Provence last summer. You know, H&A and Anban Insurance were the two biggest money laundering and influence peddling operations of the Chinese Communist Party. This is how they got their capital into the West. Anban Insurance Company was too sloppy. It wasn't because of fraud. It was because of what they call the anti-corruption. This is Wang Xishan putting him. It's 20 years of hard labor. So, and he comes from the Deng Xiaoping faction.
But
this is how much control.
But you know
this is the CCP has absolutely total control of China. This is not about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are the most decent, hardworking people in the world. They're enslaved now by a totalitarian dictatorship.
I can maybe counter that and say the reason Onbang was buying U.S. assets is because anybody that has money in China, not anybody, but a lot of people, would like to get the money out. They've instituted crackdowns on capital flights from the country.
No, they stopped it.
They stopped it. Do you think they've stopped it altogether?
Well, for certain. So look, in 2016, when all of this was happening, when it boiled to its peak, cross-border capital flows, cross-border acquisitions for Western assets got to $225 billion in 2016. 2017 was $23 billion. They turned it off. Now, you'll still see some because the Chinese Communist Party has to procure resources. So they're going to keep lending to ports in Sri Lanka and doing loan-to-own deals. They want to build air bases in Djibouti. They're going to do things, they're going to spend dollars externally for state purposes. But these ideas of companies recklessly buying hotels and soccer clubs and whatever else these guys are buying. Have you seen another one bought? Not one.
This is
beginning of 2017.
This is the importance of what Kyle was saying. In Hong Kong, remember, the Chinese Communist Party to keep going desperately needs dollars. What they need is dollars to fund the apparatus. And the reason they stopped the outflow of capital was to keep as many dollars as possible. Yeah. It was the leadership. It wasn't the little guy. It wasn't old 100 names getting his cash out. It was the leadership of the CCP that was getting their cash out. And that's why they shut it down. Listen, this is not, they're at economic war with us. This is not a trade deal. This is an armistice, okay?
Do you
they're
believe
at economic war with the West.
We're about ready to make a trade deal, by the way.
Who says? I think we're a long.
The market expects one.
Look, the market is cheerleading. This is why I say the market and Wall Street it's the IR department for the Chinese Communist Party. Every day you hear, oh, if we don't cut a trade deal that has $2 trillion of soybeans, the market's going to drop 1,000 points. Economy's going to crash.
Think they're leading? We're trying to lead them.
100%. the pressure on President Trump has been relentless. What President Trump has finally done is change the entire apparatus of the U.S. government. Instead of strategic economic dialogue where we're getting tapped along, where they're stealing our technology and we're financing them, he's finally saying no. We're going to have 6 major verticals of structural reform to basically integrate them into the West. We cannot go on with these two systems we have. We're either going to have free market capitalism as the industrial democracies have it, with freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and free capital markets with fiduciary responsibility.
Who are we as a sovereign nation to tell another sovereign nation how to act?
Because, okay, here's how we are. If we cut them off from finance and technology, the CCP would collapse in a second. That's who we are. We're the United States of America. We are a sovereign nation. You get to the point of why Trump's president of the United States. Managed decline by our elites was basically giving China everything they wanted. It was the working class that suffered. All the factories and jobs went from the Midwest. The opioid crisis, J.D. Vance,
I know,
the guy from
Hillbilly Elegy.
Hillbilly Elegy is the best social, and he tells you it's the opioid crisis that took the place when the jobs and the factories left. Tariffs are not about taxes on goods. They're about self-worth and self-determination. These factory workers, we need to bring those manufacturing jobs back. That's why this is an economic war.
But you said something to me, Kyle, years ago that it stuck with me, and I'll never forget this as long as, and I've used your line, by the way, which is there's never been a country in the history of the world that pays high wages to make low-value goods. Does the United States consumer need to pay more? It sounds, are we addicted to cheap? And what I mean by that is we want to go to Walmart, I'm not picking on Walmart, we want to go to a big box store and pay nothing for the goods, the plastics, the textiles that we buy, which means we can't pay anybody a wage or we have to make it overseas.
Look, there's a balance.
In other words, can the American consumer change, can we change the dialogue?
Well, look, global free trade brings in entropy, right? You're going to see low-wage nations move up, like we've seen in China. Yeah. You're going to see high-wage nations move down. It's just what's going to happen over time.
That's what's happening.
But again, is it a bad thing? Is it the rest of the world inflate? Brian, is it a game that's rigged or not? We're giving China the ability to raise money through Hong Kong and raise dollars through the United States, and they're forcing capital, dollar-based capital, into these MSCI and maybe the Bloomberg Bond Index. They're forcing hundreds of billions of US dollars into China to help them build the One Belt, One Road program and the islands in the South China Sea. They have to have dollars to do this.
Here's how perverted the system is. We basically have slaves in China making goods for the unemployed and underemployed in the West. This is what the Gilets Jaunes revolt in France was about. We have to start to have some equilibrium. Okay? That's why China, what Trump is doing, these major structural reforms, starts to integrate them really into the free market industrial democracies of the West, okay? Which we now know is a system that's created more freedom and more wealth than any system in history. Once the Chinese understand that the CCP is leading them down a path that can't be sustainable, once we get these two systems working together, the world will not just have peace, it'll have enormous prosperity.
This show goes out in China. This show is being broadcast live right now.
Yeah,
in China and Hong Kong.
You might get
the rest of the firewall.
No, I'm saying there are influential people in China that hopefully are watching this right now. Do you believe, and they know that you've had the ear and still probably do of President Trump, do you believe we will get a trade deal of some kind?
I think that Li He I think he represents what I call the reformers. There are many, many, many people in the Chinese Communist Party that understand they need massive economic reform. Besides political reform, economic reform to more integrate. It's those reformers that back channel keeps saying, you guys got to be tough with us. You have to be tough with us because we've got to stop this madness, particularly the warlordism that state-owned industries are. Remember, this is the way the Chinese Communist Party skims cash off the top. It's the state-owned industry, and that China's greatest export is deflation. It's overcapacity and deflation. It's why Japan.
And it's why artificial currency pegged.
It's exactly. It's why Abe's on the plane. Abe this weekend and this Friday and Saturday are a big deal. Why, when the president's going over to see the new emperor next month and then going to Osaka for the G20, when he's taking 2 trips into Japan, why is the Prime Minister of Japan flying over here? You know why? To have a frank discussion with the President of the United States, the importance of structural reform in the trade deal. Donald Trump has done more to save the industrial democracies by now having a meaningful negotiation. And all I'm saying is the American people have to have his back, and Wall Street and the corporate lobbyists and corporate America have to back off and let Trump cut the deal he wants to cut.
I'm going to flip the script on you. If you had to advise President Xi, he hires you as a consultant. to advise on what they should ask for from President Trump, what would it be?
I think what President Xi should do, first off, fire Wang Xishan, free your people, stop the Uyghurs, stop all this persecution in the underground church, bring in the rule of law. Look at how the Chinese people have prospered in Hong Kong. Basically an island with no resources. Look what they've done in Taiwan. Yeah. Look what they've done in the United States of America. What, there are 4 or 5 Chinese Americans here? These are some of the most productive, smartest, toughest, hardworking people in the world. Everywhere they've gone, they've created value in great communities. Look what China would be if you had the rule of law. That's what I'm telling number one. Number two, I would say, listen to Donald Trump. Listen to what Trump and Lighthouse and others are saying. What we're trying to do is get massive structural reform so you can start to integrate into a free market system. That system, look, I'm Irish American like you are. We came from essentially nothing, right? It was generations of people, of hardworking blue-collar people. That can happen in China. The Western democracies, the Judeo-Christian West, has created more value and more freedom for the little guy than any system in history. That can happen in China, and that's why this is not about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are as decent and hardworking as ever. This is about, we've allowed a radical cadre to take a totalitarian charge of China, and that system has to be broken. And Donald Trump's, this is why I say it's not a trade deal. It's an armistice on an economic war they've been running against the West for over 20 years.